I actually hate it when people say like, oh, if you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong. Like, I think, oh, I just think you're an idiot, like, is what I think. So we're here to work. We're not here to have fun, is my attitude.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Hong Chau is an actor. On the occasion of the release of her new movie, Driveways, she sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work.
In the movie, Driveways, your character travels to your dead sister's house to clean it up. I'm just curious, how much time did you spend obsessing over that relationship? Beyond what's in the script even. Like, is this something that you really needed to kind of mine out and even talk to the writers and the director about before you can get a handle on it? Or is this something that you didn't even feel like you needed to go into that much beyond what's there?
I think in general, to answer that question, it's a case by case. Every script, every project, every film is different, or TV show is different. In the case of Driveways, I was already familiar with Andrew Ahn's first feature, Spa Night. I saw it just at my local cinema and didn't know anything about it, didn't know anything about Andrew. I just, saw that it was an Asian face on the poster and that it was an Asian filmmaker. And and also that it was an independent film, and just, I want to go out and support those movies in the theater as much as I can. So I like to see smaller films. And I was just very moved and also impressed by the feature. So I always kept Andrew's name in the back of my head and was hoping that he would be able to continue to work and do another film, because there are countless talented indie filmmakers who only get to make one film and then you never hear from them again. Or it's like 8 years or a decade or more later until they make their next feature. And it's just such a shame. But that's really how it is. And so I just was kind of, sending good thoughts, like, I hope this guy gets to make another film soon because I think he's so talented. And so I got, the call that he wanted to meet with me for Driveways. And, this was, through my manager. He sent the script for Driveways and also a very nice letter that he had been a fan and watching things that I was in since, Treme. And so, but the funny thing was that my manager was trying to set me up, because I always try to give a little synopsis of the person's resume whenever they contact you with something. It's like, oh, this guy is so-and-so and he's done this and this and this. And I was like, I stopped him. I was like, I know exactly who this guy is. And I was very excited to dig into that script and see what he was interested in making next. And it was a really beautiful script. And I could tell, based on what I knew about Andrew Ahn's sensibility as a director, and also the sensibility of the screenwriters, because Andrew did not write the script. I could tell from reading the script that it was going to have a very observational quality to it. There was a line in there about Cody, who's the child character. Cody is, we're in the hardware store, and Cody is looking at this old faded sticker on the counter. And that just told me that's where the camera is going to be looking. It's not going to be on our faces. It's going to be on this sticker that he's peeling away at. So it's little clues like that when I read a script, I know what this is going to look like and I know the feel of it. And, this is the performance that I need to sort of give to fit into that vibe. But to get back to your original question, which was about whether I put a lot of work into my sister's backstory, for something like that, yes and no. Not. I didn't, sit and write like this whole backstory about, oh, this is, I have enough relationships in real life, or know of people who have had similar relationships, where they are not close to a relative or a sibling. And it's a little bit strained, but there's always that feeling of, well, blood is thicker than water, so there's a certain duty to a family member, even if you don't really know them that well. So I didn't really have to create a specific person where this is what happened to us at age 12. And this, I knew that in general, this was probably our age gap that we had. And that's why we weren't that close. And just imagining like what her life was like. And that's why, and what my character's life was like. And that's why we grew apart. And, those things kind of get touched upon in the story where there's a photograph of the sister and you can kind of see the age difference in it, where my character is like much younger than her in the photograph. So it's like little details like that where you get it without the any of the characters having to have a big monologue about it. And that's enough for me too as an actor.
Before we move on with Driveways, let's move back to John, the play.
Okay.
Now, I have to tell you this story. So Christopher Abbott was coming on my show. I was watching all of his stuff, really diving into him. And I said, I think I want to go to the library to see John. John's at the New York Public Library. You can go and watch the whole play.
Wait,
yeah.
You saw... Oh, it's available at the library?
It's available there. And I have to tell you, do you know how many people told me to see that play and the flick? That I was like, who is this person? Why is everybody telling me that people that don't even go to plays?
Annie Baker.
Yeah. I'm like, who is this? Who is this? I think the flick was first, then John. So I'm like, oh, you missed the flick, man, but you have to see John. You have to see John. So I went there and saw this, and I loved it. And I was mad at myself for not having gone.
Wow, I have never seen a play on video.
Is it strange? Well, let me tell you, it's kind of strange the way they have it there because they have them on these old monitors. And you sit on these weird chairs and you have headphones. And the other people you could look over and they're watching like Angels in America, over there. And then you could see that there's a musical going on. Somebody's just watching. It's mainly for scholars and for like press people, I guess. It's mainly. Yeah. Like you can't just stroll in there if you don't have a purpose to see this stuff. But it was a great recording, great sound. It looked great, sounded great. I felt like I was there. I felt like I saw it. But the one weird thing, which I also have to tell you real quick, is that night I get on my bicycle, I go riding down the street. It was late at night. I had to go feed a cat. Who is walking across the street at 11 o'clock at night? Lois Smith.
Oh.
I pull over. I say, Miss Smith, it's 11 o'clock. She's not alone. She's with somebody, thank God. I say, Miss Smith,
she's pretty cool and tough. Yeah, she's
cool and tough. Yeah, she didn't bat an eye with it. I said, I'm interviewing Christopher Abbott. I know you were in that play with him. Do you have anything to say about him? Can I get a quote, something about working with him? She said, oh, I love him, but he had a terrible time. Isn't that interesting? I asked him about it and he said, it just got to be a slog after a while. And I was wondering what your experience was like with that. Because this is your first big play, am I right? I mean, like this was a big deal.
It was my first play ever.
That's insane, considering how much dialogue there is. I mean, so to take me back to that, just getting that, and then having to do this play with what he describes. But I want your description of it. He said that Sam and Annie, Sam Gold, the director, and Annie were kind of like this team that were always kind of huddling around and whispering to each other. to each other, and it kind of unnerved him in the beginning, and he kind of got used to it. I was just wondering what that experience was like for you in your first play.
Well, I can really only speak for my experience as somebody who had never done a play before, who didn't have any experience in the theater. I thought that's how they do it. I don't know anything different. I
Right.
don't know what a rehearsal room is like. I had never been in a rehearsal room. I had never rehearsed for a month for anything
That's amazing.
that I had done. So it was a completely new process, and I loved it. I mean, it was hard. It was really, really hard. There was definitely stretches where I was so physically exhausted, and I would go back to the apartment because I was living in LA and I flew to New York, or I lived in New York at an apartment across from the theater. And I was just so physically exhausted after every rehearsal. And I just, some days I was like, I don't know why they hired me. Like, I feel like I'm doing a terrible job. Why did they hire me out of all the people? Because there are plenty of Asian actors in New York who have a degree from like Juilliard and like, NYU and all of these prestigious schools. And I hadn't done anything. I didn't know, I didn't really know if I was doing rehearsal right. I didn't know if I was rehearsing right.
Yeah.
I was just trying to keep along, and Georgia Engel was my angel throughout the whole process. She was like my buddy. We shared a dressing room together during the run of the show, and she and I have in general, I have an affinity for older people. I like my child in the movie, like in Driveways, I gravitate to older people in general. I just find that I just get along with them really well, maybe even more so than people my own age. So I just loved Georgia, and she had a very gentle way about her, which I really connected with, because I feel that I'm a little bit of a softie in that way too. There's nothing really outstanding about me when you meet me, and especially in Hollywood, and especially going to, industry events or meetings with people, it's always like they expect to be impressed by you, and that can just be very strange when you just want to be your most authentic self in presenting yourself, and it's really like, this is me. I'm just a mellow person, like this is it. And so I just really enjoyed being in Georgia Engel's company, because she just let me be. I was just completely myself around her, and we just appreciated each other. But yeah, I enjoyed the whole process. I enjoyed how hard it was. I enjoyed kind of being miserable, like, yeah, it was hard. It was a slug. But I really liked it. And that's not because I'm, a masochist or anything like that, but I just felt like the material just demanded that.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't supposed to be easy and a walk in the park. It wasn't supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
I actually hate it when people say like, oh, if you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong. Like, I think, oh, I just think you're an idiot, is what I think. So we're here to work. We're not here to have fun, is my attitude.
And you had the hardest role in that by far. I mean, what you had to do at every performance, where you had to get to at every performance emotionally.
I had a strange physical, because people always ask, is it hard for you to leave a role or get out of character, or do you bring it with you? And I so in the play, I cry during like 3/4 of the play almost. So it's like a lot of crying. And then also there's a scene where I eat eggs. And so after the play ended, I had this weird sensation in my body where I still felt like I needed to cry and eat eggs.
Whoa. Whoa.
Like, I wanted to eat eggs even though I was done with the show.
That's so weird. I thought you were going to say the exact opposite. I could never eat eggs again.
No, it wasn't like, oh, I just can't stand the sight of eggs. It was like, no, my body wanted to eat eggs.
That's so interesting.
Oh, and there was another funny coincidence that happened where, so my character in the play gets her period at a very funny
Yeah.
point during the show. And I remember texting Annie, and it was also, I forget what the, I forget, I think I was like in rehearsal or something like that. And I got my period while I was rehearsing, like that moment. And I was like, oh my God, Annie, I just got my period. And she was like, I'm dying.
I'm going to read a quote from you. I prefer not to have any character discussions. I never ask what someone thinks about his or her character, and I definitely don't want to hear what they think about my character. I want to be free to explore and do what I want. In turn, I let them show me on set what they want to do, and we go from there. Molding what an audience thinks about a character is ultimately in the director's court. I think that happens mostly in the editing room, after the actors have completed their job of giving the director a variety of takes to choose from. Now, I think this is so interesting because that feels like such a confident way of working. When I imagine like getting a role, I just imagine like I want to find out exactly what the person who wrote this thinks of this before I can even begin to allow myself to put on the clothes of the character. You know what I mean? And so the idea that you would just like, I confidently trust my own instincts with who this is, I'm going to even show up there on the set. I have it now, and then you want to change it. Give me adjustments, and I can adjust it. But I'm going to show up there confidently making bold choices. Is that basically what you're saying?
It's not about being confident and sure, but it's about being flexible and open. And I don't mean that I'm ready to just abandon everything that I would like to do with the character. I definitely, just kind of present what I have and then let them, sort of carve and choose what is really speaking to them. But, definitely if I feel, if it's going in a way that I feel is strange, and when I say strange, it's usually because I don't feel that that direction or choice has been supported by what's in the script. Mm-hmm. And then I have to take a step back and say, and ask, why? What's the reasoning or the logic behind that? Because I feel like I do that, I guess, because I then have to adjust the other little Lego pieces.
Yeah.
Of like, how does this track through the entire arc of the story? Because if I do this in this scene, then that affects this later scene.
Right.
So it's okay if we do this, but then I'm just going to have to take a second and, think about this other scene. And if you've already shot that other scene, then, that's where the tricky part comes, where it's like, well, if I already did that and that other thing, why would I do it?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me, is usually how those sort of disagreements or discussions come up for me. It's never like, oh, I just in general saw my character this way or that way. It's much more specific. I think that permeates through every little decision that you make with a character, from, when you first get that phone call from wardrobe and it's like, come in and, give me your sizes. And, and then you show up and there's this rack of clothes, or maybe there's only like one thing that they give you to try on, and then it's like, well, I don't know if this is it. Or it's like, okay, this is what the director like feels very strongly about. Okay, like then you start thinking about, well, how is he seeing the character, because this is this outfit that they feel very strongly about. So then you start getting little clues from that as well. For me, it's not really about like, oh, I'm just gonna be in the moment and see how it feels. It's like, well, it really has to make sense.
Yeah.
The whole character has to, that's where the believability comes in for me. It's not really about like, oh, I believe the performance because it was so natural. It's really all of the details really working in sync. And that's when I think a character really sings, is because all of these little details were taken care of, and there's not, something left hanging open. And you're like, well, why did they bring that, thing up in that part? And then we never revisited it.
Yes.
It's like, oh, they made a big deal about like Angela being very allergic to cats, and then like, well, why is she like cuddling a cat, like something like that. Where it's like, why would I be doing this?
Yes. Or even on much less grand scales, like that would be a major thing. Like, I thought she was allergic. Even smaller things, like I just get taken right out when it doesn't make that kind of logical sense. That's why
I think the thing for me when the logic break is like when a character becomes conveniently stupid is when it just falls apart for me, where I'm just like, up until now the character's been like really smart, like why like why are they all of a sudden like an idiot? I just don't get it. So it's usually that for me, and for whatever reason I feel like it happens more for like female characters, where it's like, oh, she was she was perfectly fine, and then now she's just dumb. I don't.
I would love you to explain this little thing you did on Driveways with Lucas J, who plays your son, where you describe it as you kind of didn't fully memorize the lines, kind of wanting to match up with him because he wasn't given all of the lines ahead of time. Is that right? Something like that? I thought that was so interesting, that because you were saying how you were like you usually memorize right down to the to an inch of your life.
For the purpose of that, we'll call it a chemistry read with Lucas. I was meeting him for the first time, and he was the only child actor that I met with for the part, thankfully. We started, before we even got into the scenes, I think there were like maybe 3 scenes that Andrew had set aside for us to like read together. And I think maybe somebody else, another director, might have asked us to improv or something like that. You know what I mean? Just to get us to just interact with each other. I knew that was the intent of the meeting, was to see just if we felt comfortable with each other. And so before we even did any of the scenes, Andrew had prepared some questions. So instead of like improv games, this was just like, hey, we're just gonna sit and talk about these topics. And I think one of the questions that I still remember is like, what do you like to do with your mom? And so I went first because I didn't want Lucas to feel like, oh, this is an interview where, he has all of this pressure to come up with this precious answer. And so I was just, and I didn't know that Andrew was going to do this, but I just felt like in that moment, like, oh, I'll just, go first and just kind of take the pressure off of him. And we did like a couple of rounds of that, and, that was fun, and just kind of got the juices flowing. And then, he knew like all of this stuff about me because I was talking about my mom and the things that I did when I was younger. So he got to know me as a person before we started into the scene work, which I thought was really smart of Andrew to do. And once we got into the scene work, I just knew that Andrew wasn't looking for a perfect scene, and that's not what I was looking for, whether this kid could memorize lines or not. I wanted to see whether he would let me touch him, if he would let me hug him, and like kind of, mess with his hair without kind of feeling like he was, shrinking away from me, which, can happen. That's natural. If a stranger touches you, you're going to be like, eh.
Yeah.
So that was, it felt pretty easy and natural. It didn't feel like we had this poor kid tap dancing for us or anything like that. That was actually the thing that he didn't want, was he was afraid that he was maybe over rehearsed. So he gave Lucas a scene that he hadn't seen yet from the script, because he didn't have the entire script. And so we just kind of read through that last one that he hadn't seen before, kind of like a cold read, I guess, and just to see like how he handled that, whether he was thrown by it. So yeah, I don't know where Andrew got these ideas. I don't know if he asked somebody else for advice, or if he just kind of came up on this on his own. But Andrew Ahn himself used to be a child actor. He acted when he was younger, so I don't know if maybe he was basing this off of his own experience as well. So I thought that was pretty fun.
Poor Brian Dennehy passed away.
Oh, don't say poor Brian Dennehy. I think Brian Dennehy would not want us to be sad, because he was so proud and satisfied with the full and rich life that he lived. He played football. He was a Marine. He just did every stage play that you've ever heard of. He's been the sheriff in Rambo. He really, the thing that to be sad about is that he is one of the last of his kind. They don't make them like him anymore. There's not some young Brian Dennehy coming up in Hollywood right now. He grew up in New York during a time that we are nostalgic for. The New York that we wish that we could experience.
Yeah.
That's the time that he grew up in, and we talked a little bit about acting. The thing that I remember most, because he said it several times, is that he always approached it with joy, and he never took the heaviness home with him, or really wanted to dance in that dark pool, no matter what the character was, even if the character was going through something themselves. He always approached it with a sense of joy, which I think is different and opposite of everything that we've heard about, like method acting or what have you. So it's really interesting, because he's built like a truck, and thinking of all the characters that he's played. And speaking of looking up plays at the library, I definitely want to try to find a copy of him in Death of a Salesman.
Oh, yes.
So,
and
yeah.
just thinking about Lucas J. at Brian Dennehy's age, and thinking, telling someone I was in this movie with Brian Dennehy, like, warms my heart. But what would warm my heart more is if Lucas doesn't have to say the name of the movie, because we would know what the movie is, because this is that kind of movie. And when I saw it, when I watched it, and before Brian Dennehy died, so I was watching this about a month ago, and it got over. I'm like, that is an amazing ending, and an amazing role for Brian, an amazing way to end the movie. And how many times are we going to have a movie that is on this such a small scale, where everybody's amazing and so real and everything, and it ends like that? But instantly, because it's just the way I am, I just got like angry because I know the current climate. This is before this COVID thing happened, you know? I just was like, I know the climate for this kind of movie. I know the current industry and everything. I'm like, how is this movie going to get the oxygen that it needs, that it deserves? And I know that I've read it in interview after interview with you. You champion small movies. You want to be in small movies. You turn down big things, if I'm correct from what you've said. And so I want to know how you feel about this kind of thing. Are you looking at stuff like this pessimistically like I do, optimistically, and now with this whole current thing of like we're not even going to be able to see this in a movie theater right now? How does all this sit with you?
Oh, well, thank you for saying that about Driveways, because I agree with you. I think it is a special little film. And it's unfortunate that the smaller films that don't have a lot of spectacle are the ones that people are more likely to skip and say, oh, I'll just watch that later. Maybe,
Yes.
when it's streaming or something like that. I think it's actually more important to see a smaller movie in a theater because you actually pay attention, and that's the only thing that you're focused on. And that's what a small movie, a quiet movie, really requires, is your attention. Mm-hmm. And you can watch one of those big blockbuster movies at home that's just like the sound is at a, maxed out and there's 1,000 things happening on the screen all at once. That's the thing that you can leave on the TV, walk away, go to the fridge, get something to eat, and then come back and watch it, and you haven't missed anything. That's the kind of movie that you can skip and save it for later when it's just streaming. I had this experience watching Personal Shopper. And that was a movie where I was just like super busy, and I thought maybe like I wouldn't get a chance to go see it in the theater. And I'm so glad I did, because the sound was so important to that film, because it would not have been the same experience had I watched it at home. You really needed to be in a theater. But again, that's a small, weird movie. That's not what people are really prioritizing when they say like, oh, these are the 2 movies that I'm going to see this month, that I'm going to actually pay the money and take the time to go to a movie theater to see. So I think, the best use of your time and money, if there's only a small handful of movies that you can see, go see the little ones, because those are actually the ones that are going to be best served by that theater experience. And then to your other point about imagining Lucas J. Getting to be Brian Dennehy's age, when we talk about diversity and progress, people, and it just frustrates me, people fixate on awards. Like who's getting what, who's not getting, something. And I think awards are the worst way to gauge progress in this industry. What does matter to me is that we're giving an opportunity to a young actor like Lucas to work on really great material at this stage in his life, to serve as a foundation for his career so that he can go on and do other things and not just, silly sitcoms or something like that, which there's plenty of diversity on things like that, but that's not really the thing that's going to feed you and sustain you and make you want to keep doing this for decades, the way that we see Brian Dennehy,
Yes.
till his dying breath still wanted to be at work, because he loved what he did, because the material was good. And if the material is not there, you can't really keep at this, and I felt that, where before I got John, I was ready to quit acting because I had already done Treme and Inherent Vice, but those are like nothing things, but it just wasn't enough to sustain me, you know, because those projects, there was so much time that passed in between each one, and it was like the good material is so rare for anyone. I'm not even talking about as an Asian person or as a woman. Like, it's just rare in general, you know, and to be able to have something like Driveways be his first movie in the way that I feel so grateful that Inherent Vice was my first movie, you know, I like, that's the thing that I look at and say, yes, that's progress right there. That's the direction we should be heading. And that's what we should be talking about and celebrating, and not all of this BS about, like, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it just, that sort of conversation just sucks up so much oxygen. And I think it's the wrong conversation to be having. And, you know, that's where you end up just talking in a circle and nothing gets done, because it's just like impossible. It's like, if it wasn't there to begin with, how are you going to give an award for it? You know, like, that's the thing.
Yes, you're giving us hope.
I see it.
Hong Chau, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.